Today, on part 14 of our Grand Cherokee project series. It's all about lights as we go through and replace every forward-facing light on the Jeep. We'll be upgrading some of the old weathered halogen lights with brighter and more efficient LEDs, and also change the configuration to be more useful when out camping or on the trail. Yep, it's another round of light bars before lockers, but hey, it is important to see where you are going and at least attempt to look cool while doing it. Back in 2014, I purchased my first Jeep ever, which is this, a 1994 Jeep Grand Cherokee Laredo. With the big 5.2-liter V8 engine and low miles, this completely stock ZJ was full of potential. Since then, well, we've done a few upgrades and modifications. Past projects include a 3.5-inch lift, transfer case swap, custom roof rack, lights, skid plates, and so much more. We've transformed this stock ZJ into a capable off-road rig and reliable daily driver that's taken us all across Arizona. Today, we continue the project. Okay, so real quick, I want to go over the motivations for changing the lighting setup and what I'll be replacing the old lights with. The biggest reason for this project starts with the rooftop tent. Whenever I go out camping with the tent, the light bar and spotlights on the roof make for tight clearance when unpacking or packing the tent up, and because of the way the lights sit, I actually can't put all of the window pulls into the tent. Which, admittedly, isn't the end of the world, but reason enough to aim for a lower profile setup on the roof rack. This means getting a slimmer light bar and mounting it lower, and also getting rid of what has been called the Mickey Mouse ears by some, which can look a bit weird when there's nothing else on the roof like a tent or a tire. So for the lighting setup itself, I really like having a combination of the wide-angle flood driving lights up front, the more focused spotlight beams mounted up higher, and having a combo of flood and spotlights on the light bar. That way you can run some or all of the lights depending on what I need in any given situation. Setting up camp in the dark, turn on just the floodlights. On a dark trail in the middle of nowhere, turn on everything for maximum coverage. So the plan going forward is to have the low profile combo light bar up top, move the spotlights to a slightly lower position above the hood to serve as ditch lights, which will also get them off the roof, and upgrade but keep the floodlights mounted on top of the winch up on the front bumper. And while we're at it, may as well replace the now yellowed and weathered headlights. Replacing the front spotlights was perhaps the easiest part of the project, which required simply unbolting the old lights and remounting the new ones using the hardware that came with it. To replace the old ProComp 55-watt floodlights I had up there, I'd be installing a pair of 4-inch 19-watt floodlights from Super Bright LEDs, the same company I bought all of the interior replacement bulbs featured way back in part 7 of this very project series. Full disclosure, no portion of this video is sponsored. I spent all of my own money and I'm not getting anything for what I'm saying. I picked what I did because of my experiences in the past and the price was right. These floodlights have a 50-degree beam pattern and put out a little over 2,000 lumens each. Getting the lights wired into the existing setup didn't take long, and having already installed all the necessary wires, fuse block, and switches inside meant it was essentially plug and play. We would be reconfiguring the switch panel and that setup inside a little bit later, but we'll get into that in a bit. Next up was swapping out the headlights, which was just as easy. Luckily, only the main rectangular light needed replacement, and not all 3 different plastic pieces. For some reason, these main lights seem to be especially susceptible to weathering, but they are simple enough to swap. Although, anytime we work on the front grille area or inside with the plastic panels, it is always a little bit nerve-wracking since the plastic gets so brittle and things usually break. Which of course happened when reinstalling the lights. Luckily, we were able to make the lights snap back into their proper place. And down the road, maybe I'll upgrade the actual headlight bulbs themselves to something brighter and less yellow, so if you have any recommendations, I'd love to hear them. Continuing our way back, the next add-on was actually something new rather than just a swap out. To mount the spotlights around the upper hood / lower windshield area, which are often referred to as ditch lights, we'd need some kind of mounting bracket. Now, there are a million different options for mounting off-road auxiliary lights. For me, I wanted to mount them as high up the hood as possible, almost out of the sight of the driver, tucked up closer behind the mirrors. To achieve this, I ended up finding a set specifically for the first generation Grand Cherokee made by APOC Industries. It's a relatively simple bracket, but it is designed to perfectly fit multiple positions, styles of light, and it was only $30, so it was a real no-brainer. They mount underneath the Torx bolts along the gap where the hood meets the fender panel, and can be configured in a number of different ways depending on how you want your lights to mount. The lights I'm putting here are 3-inch, 20-watt pods from Oxbeam, the same brand I've been using for my backup and camp lights, which I've been really happy with. These are also about 2,000 lumens apiece, but have a more focused beam pattern. Mounting them was, of course, super simple, although we found it helpful to attach the lights before attaching the mounts to the Jeep due to some clearance issues. For these lights, we would need to run wires to power and to the switch panel inside. If you're unfamiliar with my setup, I have two different 3-switch panels inside. One is mounted low underneath the dash cluster on the right side beneath the overdrive button. The other panel we incorporated into an empty spot on the overhead console. Up to now, the lower panel handled all the forward-facing lights while the upper panel held the rear lights, and 4 out of the 6 total switches were used. Since we would be rewiring and adding new lights, I figured this would be the best time to rearrange this setup a little bit. On the lower panel, the floodlights would stay in the same spot, and the rear lights would be moved to the right position with the middle left open for now. The upper panel would house the ditch lights and light bar on the roof, with the middle switch left open for future additions. To me, this setup just kind of made more sense having the lights below the hood on one panel and the lights over the hood and up on the roof on another panel. But of course, they're both pretty much within easy reach of the driver. Running the new wiring was mostly straightforward, although we did have to take care to make sure the wires and the mounting bracket didn't get pinched by opening or closing the hood. We carefully fed the wires through the firewall. On the inside, we removed both switch panels to make things easier to work with, and removed the A-pillar plastics where a lot of wiring was tucked to get to the roof. Last, but certainly not least, was to work on the lights up on the roof itself. Since all of these lights were mounted directly to one of the crossbars on the roof, all we needed to do was remove the end caps on the roof rails and slide the crossbar free. These lights wouldn't be reused, but we could utilize the wires already running from the switch panel to the roof to make things just a little bit easier. It didn't take long to get the old lights free and work on a bit more of the wiring setup, which after a few hours of work in the garage, was nice to see that at least some of the new lights were working already. It was getting late, so we called it a night and got back to it the next day to wrap things up. Having covered a lot of ground the day before, today would be focused on mounting the light bar, cleaning up the wires, and making sure everything worked. The light bar going up on the roof is a 32-inch Rigid Horse branded light that claims a 30,000 lumen brightness in a part spot, part floodlight combo. It is also a single row light bar and much lower profile than my prior one. We opted to mount this directly to the front of the roof rack. This would put the light bar a bit further back, but also several inches lower, although it still retained enough clearance to not be blocked by the roofline. We got everything measured and centered before using the included mounting hardware to affix the light bar to the rack. From here, it was simply a matter of running wires from the light bar, down through the roof, and underneath the headliner to the switch panel. And once we ensured that all the lights and their appropriate switches were working properly, we could start buttoning things up. We took the wires and replaced the panels and switches, which that will do it for this project update. Not the biggest improvement I've ever made to the Jeep, but one of those quality of life things that is part of the slow and ongoing refinement process. Yes, lights are low on the priority list and they tend to be fairly cheaper, but my old lighting setup was getting a bit dated and had been on the Jeep nearly since I got it 8 years ago. Even a few minor tweaks helps to keep things fresh cosmetically and will make adventuring and camping just a little bit easier, and that's a win in my book. Thanks for watching this Jeep update, and as always, we'll see you on the next one.